martial artist and understood how people like work, and then how to
Actually,
shut
yeah.
them down.
What's interesting is this comes back to why a mechanics first approach is useful,
Yeah.
because that isn't what he wanted. And he just didn't know how to articulate it because he didn't know enough about the system. He didn't know enough about the mechanics to be able to say, this is how much magic I want to cast. This is how my spells work. This is the abilities I'm looking for. So he actually ended up not liking that character because it was too martial artsy.
Darn
Yeah.
it.
So it was one of those.
I didn't know that.
Again, well, and that's why a mechanics first approach is so helpful, because now you can really, you don't teach that a monk is a martial artist. You teach that a monk has an efficient action economy that's low damage dealing and controlling. You know, you don't teach that a fighter is a weapons master. You teach that a fighter is going to let you take an additional action every short rest and that they have second wind, you know, because they'll get in their head. Like one of the things he said to me once is, if I knew what a druid was in D&D, I would have been a lot happier playing a druid. Like, because he just didn't understand a druid is sit back and controlling. You know, controller, healer. That's what the function of a druid is. And that's why he was so happy with Wizard, is because he understood how wizards work in D&D. So he felt effective being the class he was playing at, because there was a harmony between the mechanics that he wanted and the story he wanted to tell. And Rogue, he eventually played a Thief Rogue. He also loved Thief Rogue just because it was simple. Like, it was just sneak attack, cunning action, done, you know? Throw him a magic weapon, even more effective. So it's one of those things where, again, sometimes I've gotten a little bit of flack for this, where it's like, you know, well, if you're setting your players up for metagaming, you're setting your players up to be thinking about the rules more than the story, and it's like, no. I trust my players will be involved in the story to what's appropriate for what they want out of the experience. Just because you want a story-based experience doesn't mean the players at your table want that now, because that can also change. So it just, I found my players were a lot happier when they knew up front what the mechanics did, and then they could tell a story that matched.
And what does it do when we open the door? Imagine this. Imagine for just a moment. Every class, we have now stripped away the story around the class. The class is only a set of features and abilities. It's a set of action economy and like a sort of game flow. And then it is up to a conversation between the DM and the player to create the story around those features and decide, hey, does the story I want to tell fit the features that are present? Because, oh my God, that's really all it is. The whole class system that we have is just, it's a representation of high fantasy, but the tropes that are existing they're just tropes. They're just commonalities in the grander scheme of things that we've sort of seen in overall representation of media, but it's not the only representation in media. And therefore, what I've been telling my students a lot lately is my way is not the only way. My way is never the only way. There might be more efficient ways, but there's never only one way to do this thing. So what if you look at the monk and strip away the name monk, and it's just I want to act as a controller. I want to hit multiple times in a round. I want to be fast and self-sufficient. Okay, I want to be a ninja. Can I be a ninja? Yeah, you can be a ninja. Now you can act like a ninja. You can dress like a ninja. Your story you want to tell is a ninja, and you're fast and self-sufficient, and you attack multiple times in a round, and you have control elements like a ninja. Cool, you're a ninja now. You don't even have to say that you're a monk. No, I'm a ninja. It's just the story I tell is a ninja, and you have the features of the class that happens to have these archetypal abilities. Doesn't even have to be, I came from a monastery. Yeah, whatever. You're a ninja.
Yeah, see, the thing with that is I would explain the separation, but still keep the class name only so that they can do it themselves, because that's what's important. You want them to understand your ninja character is going to use monk mechanics, where this is the class that's going to fit, so that it's training them to separate flavor and mechanics, so that when they go to do it for themselves, they can do it better than we can. That's eventually kind of what we're going, because that's how you get the Kiki build or the Zen Weaver build, is you teach them to look for it for themselves, so you as the dungeon master can be pleased and a little surprised, when they come to the table with a wacky build you never thought would work, and it does, because they've thought it out for themselves.
And when I say remove the titles, it's really just as a thought experiment to go, hey, what if we just stripped all that away? Because then by removing that, does that then open up our thinking to think about the canvas with little thought points to then put in the story that we want? But then when we bring it back to the table, yes, use the appropriate title cards so that we know where your abilities are coming from, so you can build it yourself.
Yeah, and like Jeremy Crawford has said this too, and I think it was at D&D Celebration 2020, but I could be wrong, where he said that, when they designed the player's handbook, they were thinking about archetypes in fantasy. And they really were thinking, this is the story we want to tell. As game designers, what are balanced mechanics that will line up with that? Because as the people who make the game, they can make that decision. And ultimately, you can make that decision too. It's just, a lot of times, if you also don't understand the rules as intended, blah, blah, blah. He did say, as soon as you multi-class, you go off the grid. Like, as soon as you multi-class, if you want to take a level of Warlock, we have a feature called Otherworldly Patron. It'll give you mechanics. You are not bound by that explanation. So it's just, now you get to tell us, what's the story of your character? How did they multi-class? What does that mean for them? And you can try a weird Frankenstein storytelling approach of why they multi-class the way they did. But as the lead designer of 5th edition, I give you permission to go off the grid. And a lot of times I think a lot of players and DMs need to hear that as the official D&D, like, big cheese, you have permission to play the game that's fun for you, Like, to speak to Adamus's point, like, as the DM, when you're having your players tell you about their characters, in terms of a mechanical build, you make your mechanical choices of what you take for your character based on the major cinematic moments that you want your character to have, So if you want one of your characters, like, defining memorable things that they've done in the campaign to be tracking down the monster like an expert, taking Scout Rogue is probably a good move, like having an expertise in survival, So as the DM, you're thinking of it in terms of what mechanics, how does the system interpret the mechanics so that this player can have this cinematic and memorable moment that they want for their character, If they want the memorable moment to be, I deal a lot of damage because my sword strike, was just that precise. Sneak attack from Rogue can be the way to do that, because it doesn't ask for any magic, it doesn't ask for anything other than the weapon you're using and having the conditions right to be able to deal massive damage, If one of your major cinematic moments is, I want to be able to take a meteor swarm to the face. Like, I want them to have their biggest world-ending spell and me to say, that's all you got. Taking Bear Totem Barbarian with a little bit of evasion from Monk or Rogue, that can tell that story really effectively. So the way you go about it is you don't look at, Rangers are good archers. Look at the picture there. So that lady has a bow. You look at it in terms of, how do you want your character to be remembered? What do they do that creates that internal theater of the mind for everybody at the table? And what mechanic is going to match that up, even if it's later down the road, So, like, if you want it to be, like, you want your character to be able to explode a whole city. They're not going to get that at level 2. And what can we look for in the future? So it's like, well, sorcerer level 18 gets an ability like that here. So because you know you're going to need to be sorcerer 18, this is kind of the track that is probably going to work for you. Is that what you want? It's that constant confirmation to make sure that both parties are honestly communicating, you know? So yeah, thinking in terms of the major memorable moments first, so that you kind of begin with the end in mind, then figure out the character's mechanics from there, allows you to create a lot of intentioned characters. And it also leaves you a little bit of room for discovery, you know? So like level to level, it's like, what cool thing does my character have access to now?
Thank you so much for listening to some of our podcast highlights. This podcast is part of the Darkmoor Podcast Network. If you want to support the content creators, feel free to visit our Patreon. And please, game responsibly.